as well. Shooter Breeze topic number 3 says, is Dr. Sebi becoming mainstream? What do you think of his advice? This is a thread. This is going to take us to X. Let me share my screen. Let me make sure you guys can see it. Absolutely. So on X, this is from Manu Sisti. I don't know who that is. He says, meet Dr. Sebi. Looks like a white guy. He says, meet Dr. Sebi. At 30, he had diabetes. By 40, he healed himself with herbs. By 50, he treated celebrities like Michael Jackson. Here are 8 hacks that heal thousands when doctors couldn't, and how you can use them. A thread. So this comes with a warning thing from from them people. Let me see if I could get through it. I don't see where number 1 is, but number 2 says, most of you feel fatigued during the day. Dr. Sebi guarantees higher energy levels if you consume these 4 natural foods. You better add them to your diet. So this has a video. I'll play it.
Turnips, carrots, beets, but these things are hybrid. Whether you cook them or you eat them raw, you're not going to get any benefit from them because they're hybrid. But if you take something natural, like the teosinte, you cook it, you get energy. If you don't cook it, you get energy. Why? Because anything that's natural has energy, and you cannot kill energy. It's displaced from one state to another. Turnips, carrots, beets, but these things are hybrid.
So number 3 says, they made you believe that losing weight is hard. Dr. Sebi proved the opposite. He used to weigh around 290 pounds. Now he weighs around 120. Here's how he managed to do it naturally. Everyone can apply this. So I'll play this as well.
I was 291 pounds. Now I only weigh 120. That's all I weigh, 120 pounds. And trust me, I haven't felt this good in my whole entire life. What I did in the last 6 months was to discontinue anything that had glucose. Glucose is the underlying enemy. Whenever you indulge in glucose, it would be difficult to lose fat. I discovered a plant known as Cusca. Cusca is a plant that the Maya used to use. And they use another one known as the teosinte. I eat those plants. Those plants does not have starch or glucose. You will look at your body losing weight and you're going to get frightened.
It's time to take control of your health. Come with me to discover the basic principles that will empower you to have the vibrant life you have been hoping and praying your whole life.
I was 291 pounds.
Yeah. So the next point says, did you know Dr. Sebi's methods are public? And that's why his books are some of the best-selling health titles on Amazon. Anyone can publish their own version and make passive income on KDP. DM me the word book and I'll show you. So this is, I guess, a guy's hustle at the end of the day. Number 4 says, he also believed that all diseases can be healed just by using natural remedies. So this is another video chat.
Dr. Sebi believed that all disease can be cured just with natural remedies. These are his top 3 recommendations. Number 1, the lion's mane mushroom. Known for its ability to stimulate the growth of new brain cells and help prevent and cure depression and anxiety. Number 2, batana oil. This helps strengthen and repair damaged hair and also can be used to help remove blemishes and scars from your skin. Lastly, in Dr. Sebi's biggest recommendation, sea moss. Now with sea moss, the benefits are literally endless, but just to get into a few, sea moss is high in fiber and rich in prebiotics and helps with good gut bacteria, leading to better gut health. Follow for daily health tips.
So number 5 says, according to him, that's the number 1 natural substance to heal the body.
I agree with the position of chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is one of the most effective and quickest way to heal the human body. But the chlorophyll would have to come from a natural base, and wheat is not a natural product of life. So therefore, the end product of wheat would necessarily be an acid one. And that is the subject, acidity versus alkalinity. Acidity has but one purpose. Acidity enters the human body to destroy cells, to cause cell erosion. Alkalinity, on the contrary, alkalinity comes to support life and to maintain electricity. I agree with...
Point number 6 says, in that video, Dr. Sebi is 78 years old and his body is extremely strong and solid. He credits it all to the type of food he consumes. Do yourself a favor and watch this. So, here we go. Wait. I'm messing up.
I'm going to give you something really fast. When I wake up in the morning, in order for me to maintain my knees in good shape, I could fall on my knees. When I was 30, I couldn't do that. At 78, I could do it because I drink that sea moss. Mug of sea moss in the morning and 2 glasses of water. It'll straighten your bones. It'll straighten your nerve. So in the morning when you wake up, don't think of those eggs, but that's gonna hurt you. So you would think at 78, I should be sicker than when I was at 30, right? I couldn't fall on my knees. I fall on my knees on concrete. I don't feel the pain. But the people who use chelated calcium, coral calcium, tell them to do that. They leave their knees on the floor. I'm gonna give you something really fast. When I wake up in the morning, in order for me to maintain my knees in good shape, I could fall on my knees. When I was 30, I couldn't do that. At 78, I could do it because I drink that sea moss. Mug of sea moss in the morning and 2 glasses of water. It'll straighten your bones. It'll straighten your nerve. So in the morning when you wake up, don't think of those eggs, but that's gonna hurt you. So you would think that at 78, I should be sicker than when I was at 30, right? I couldn't fall on my knees. I fall on my knees on concrete. I don't feel any pain. But people who uses chelated calcium, coral calcium, tell them to do that. They leave their knees on the floor. I'm gonna give you some.
So number 7 says, stevia, maple syrup, coconut sugar. Dr. Sebi suggests only one natural sweetener. Everyone knows about it, but no one uses it.
Agave may have a very bad reputation by many. Agave is not a hybrid. Agave is a cactus that comes from the desert. I remember reading on the agave label that it was the only glucose-free. It's not like sugar, which had glycerinic acid. Agave coming from a natural source cannot have glycerinic acid. That only comes from cane. Agave may have a very bad reputation by many. Agave is not a hybrid. Agave is a cactus that comes from the desert. I remember reading on the agave label that it was the only glucose-free, not like sugar, which had glycerinic acid. Agave coming from a natural source cannot have glycerinic acid. That only comes from cane. Agave may have...
Number 8 says, here are 13 foods that, according to Dr. Sebi, will detoxify your body. Sea moss, bladderwrack, burdock root, dandelion root, ginger, soursop, and nopal, which is the prickly pear cactus. Hold on. There's more. Cucumbers, key limes, chickpeas, kale, avocados, and figs. So these are the 13 foods, according to Dr. Sebi, which will detoxify your body. And that's an image of them. Then the guy says, thank you for reading this until the end, which I'm sure he's going to sell you something at the end. But I'll keep this up here. 13 foods, according to Dr. Sebi, that will detoxify your body. I'll read them again. Sea moss, bladderwrack, burdock root, dandelion root. By the way, if you're trying to get off of coffee, roasted dandelion root tea in the tea bag, it has a similar, if not the same taste to coffee, but it's a tea, and it's actually good for you. I can tell you that for sure. Ginger, soursop, prickly pear, cucumbers, key limes, cheese, kale, avocados, and figs. So those are the 13 foods I would suggest folks look into and start to add to their diets. Before I bring it to the panelists, let me just read a couple of the comments here. Let me see. Sister Ross says, yes, Dr. Sebi, a natural holistic healer. She says, Dr. Sebi says there's no money in healing. The money come with the treatment. So one of the things I give, and I actually believe in Dr. Sebi's teachings, actually. One of the things I really agree with Dr. Sebi before he passed, and I believe they killed him too. I'm one of those people. But one of the things he said on the Rock Newman show, and it always stuck with me. He said that why is it that we have these black leaders, and these black leaders never talk about diet, never talk about how to eat. I guess the last one who really talked about it was the leader of the NOI. But you don't really hear people talking about it, and it's super important. The Rastafarians talk about it. I guess NOI within that community they probably talk about it, but in general, there's no black leadership who's talking about we need to push for, say, Pan-Africanism. We need to push for power. We need to push for state seizure, etc. But no one talks about you need the fuel to do those things. You need your mind right to do those things. You have to eat a certain way to get that done. So I always respected them for that. Let me just continue with the comments before I throw it to the panel. Trigger Ivy262 Plus says, I always get confused about the discourse surrounding Dr. Sebi because it seems like black people become medical professionals all of a sudden when they talk about him. He goes on to say, because I get the ick of a automatic trust for white medical systems, yet the evidence shows that their systems have caused us harm over and over again. I agree with you there. He says, Trigapi says, diet can also be the opportunity to get in depth about the limits and assess, I guess, access to food as well. Sister Ross says, dandelion leaves also. Yeah, but drink that tea. I'm telling you, if you want to kick a coffee addiction. Sister Ross says, agave is a plant that grows here in the mountains. She's talking about Jamaica. And they also make tequila out of it. Yeah, that's what it's pretty much known for, the tequila aspect. But I use agave as a sweetener, and I could tell you it does well for your glucose, like your blood sugar levels and stuff like that. So KW7 lastly says 120 is too low a weight for a male standing 6'2". Yeah, he was pretty small. Maybe he got too small. Maybe that's what led to his death. But I kind of believe those Hondurans. Sorry, but I kind of believe those Hondurans kind of did him in. Anyway, with that said, let me throw it to the panel. The panel's gone kind of short now, I guess, because of the connectivity issues. But if you want to try, click the link, join the panel, join the discussion. Let me start with Brother Bakari. Brother Bakari, is Dr. Sebi becoming mainstream? What do you think of his advice?
Excuse me. I listened to Dr. Sebi. He may be coming mainstream for us, for black folks. I'm going to tell you what made me listen to that. I had never heard of Dr. Sebi, right? And I went to the hospital, of course, like I went to my doctor. And, of course, my doctor's black. And as we sitting in there, they said because I'm going to be honest, I got really big. Now, I think 120 is small, too, 6'2". I think that's kind of sickly. That's me personally. But anyway, I had gotten really fat for my height. And they said I had my high blood pressure. They offered me pills. Then it was like my good cholesterol is very low and my bad cholesterol is really high, and so on and so forth. And I told him I wasn't taking no medicine to live, man. You can give me some alternative to that medicine. I just don't trust having to take a pill and sticking myself with a needle or whatever, because they was talking about diabetes and all that, right? I said, I'm not taking no diabetic pills. I'm not doing that. That don't sound right to me. In the diet that he gave me, green vegetables, a lot of green vegetables, cut out, fried foods, no pork, right? So years later, and he told me, let me go, in at least 30 minutes exercise a day, right? I went back to him in 3 months. I followed his diet, what he said, and my blood pressure was normal. Everything was right again. So I'll say a few years later, I ran across a Dr. SEBI video, right? And what he said for diabetes was the exact same thing that my doctors had told me earlier. But the one thing I do know, when Dr. Sebi say there's a cure for diabetes, in the medical world, they would never say it's a cure. What they call it is, they will say your diabetes is in remission. And they have something that's called a permanent remission, which is basically a cure, saying it won't come back. Now, this is what my doctors told me, but it won't. I go and I'm not in whatever it won't come back. So that's what made me look more into Dr. Sebi and trust some of the stuff that Dr. Sebi says and some of the stuff he does. Like, he still have his cell food. He still have his cell food stuff, right? Cell food store. Now, the one thing, and I don't know, I think Dr. Sebi was on to something when he say he cured AIDS and he went to court for it in Detroit to prove it. I think they were in Michigan. And what he gave to people 30 days later, it wasn't there. 60 days later, it didn't show up. HIV didn't show up. But later on, those same people, the HIV came back. And they were somewhat showing that they were still on the Dr. Sebi diet, right? So, if you go to his cell food stores, whatever, they can't say they cured AIDS anymore, HIV or whatever, because that came back. But the reason I say he was onto something, it was a doctor in Mississippi that years later cured AIDS in little babies. So I think Dr. Sebi was on to something. He may have not had the complete cure yet, but can't nobody tell me if he know enough. Now, this is me in my conspiracy, right? And I don't normally discuss conspiracies out loud, but can't nobody tell me that if he knew enough to have HIV leave where it don't show up for 30 days, 60 days, right, that he wasn't on to something. So they can't make me believe whatever it was he was doing. They took that and want to use it and implement into what they want to do. And then years later, someone can say they cured AIDS in babies. I think that doctor was in Jackson, Mississippi, I think. So, yes, I rock with Dr. Sebi.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bakari. I've heard people recently kind of try to clown him on it. See, the thing with guys like Sebi and him, I've said this before on Shoot the Breeze too, years ago, that those guys like Sebi who aren't trained guys, but they do their research and stuff like that, they speak in ways. It reminds me like of my grandparents. My grandparents are from a little settlement in an island called Eleuthera. The way they would speak about certain things is not the most sophisticated, but if you break it down, it makes sense. So Sebi would say, well, like, the underlying cause of most disease is inflammation and mucus. But if you go and you check what the white establishment, the medical doctors are talking about, they'll tell you inflammation is huge, is a huge underlying problem in sickness. So he wasn't wrong what he was saying. It's just how he said it. One of the things he mentioned about like the HIV stuff, he said, like if you people who are sick on the AIDS ward and stuff like that, one of the things you'll notice is that they keep expelling mucus. And eventually, if you peep the records, what kills them is like pneumonia and stuff like that, which is a buildup of mucus in the lungs and whatnot. So he's not wrong in what he's saying. He just says it in a way that I think a lot of people don't quite pick up on what he's saying, on what he's trying to tell you. You know?
Don't understand. You know, I actually know a lady whose daughter used she had breast cancer and her daughter had a type of cancer. She didn't use Dr. Sebi. Her daughter she implemented Dr. Sebi with what the doctors gave her, and she beat cancer. Both of them actually beat cancer, but she said her daughter implemented Dr. Sebi's diet and what he said was good for it with what they were doing. So, you know, and here's the thing. I'm gonna tell you, see, this is what I thought about, right? Because I didn't tell you what the doctor told me when I told him to give me an alternative, right? You know what the doctor told me? This is what my black doctor told me. You know what he told me? At that time, he said he had his own practice for 20 years. I was the first patient he ever had that asked for an alternative. He said, normally you tell patients, well, they gonna need this, this, and this. They just go get it. So when I asked for the alternative, he said he was glad that I asked for the alternative, and he was glad to give me an alternative to the medication, something that I can try. But he said I was his only patient since he had in 20 years of having his own practice that someone asked for an alternative. Now, let me ask you, what do you think it was, Koku? Because like Dr. Sebi was like 86 when he died, right?
Yeah, 83 or something like that.
Yeah, like now I do think our people back in the day had their own gardens and stuff, and they did eat more. But like my grandmama don't nobody know how old she was. We believe she was at least 100 when she died. She didn't know how old she was. I believe she didn't know how old she was when she died, right? But we think she was at least 100. She died in 96. So do you think the people back then was able to live longer because even though they ate stuff that we shouldn't eat, like pig foots and stuff, and Lord knows that pork was good when I ate it. But do you also think it was because they would grow some of that, like a lot of stuff they had, like the chickens, the eggs, everything, it came from the yard. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of the vegetables did not come out of a store. It came from the yard. Do you think that has something to do with the reason our folks was living?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like I mentioned my grandparents, right? These are people who, in fact, there was a time, you know, being from the Bahamas, there was a time all them old folks used to push what we call bush medicine. All them folks used to push bush medicine. Yeah, you ate the pork and all that kind of stuff. But for example, like my grandmother was a farmer. Before school started, right? When we were in school, before school started, we had to take a purge. We had to drink Cerasee and stuff like that and take a purge and get all out the toxins from the stuff that we was eating during the summer and whatnot before we go back to school, because they understood you have to purge the toxins out of you. If you're gonna go learn, you have to purge that stuff out of you, man. I think that's a feature of being African, to be honest. And I think the more we get into in our case, being in America, like the American diet or the Western diet and all that kind of stuff, we are taken away from ourselves, man. We are taken away from ourselves. We have to get back to this stuff. And by the way, I like that Bakari mentioned the cell. I forget what Sebi them call it. The cell food. The cell food stuff. If you go to their website, a lot of stuff that he's talking about here, the sea moss, the bladderwrack, the burdock root, a lot of that is actually in those those pills that he sells. And I'm telling you, I myself took some of those pills for about a solid year, and I followed the diet, and every ailment that I had was gone, absolutely gone. So we got to start understanding when these older folks talk, they speak a different way. And as a matter of fact, I want to highlight a comment here from
On Raw.
Trigger Happy. No, Trigger Happy says, that's why I said before, we have been programmed to need the explanation of white scientists to validate what black people were already saying. You can even apply that to our spiritual practices. I think we got to stop understanding things in a white way, so to speak. And we got to start understanding things in the way that Africans communicate. You know what I mean?
Yep, you're correct, and I'm gonna tell you something. Speaking of being healthy and what we're talking about now, when we keep talking about revolution, and we can talk about everything, right? So we can talk about all the stuff we need, but we also need to be healthy and be in shape.
Absolutely.
Maybe we need to do a live on that because that's one of the things we need. We need to be healthy and be in shape. Cause shit hit the fan. How many of us can run 3 miles?
Absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
know, what you, Cheryl, you can.
I run about 15 miles a week.
That is great. You know what?
Wonderful.
I'm gonna be honest with you. I got lazy. I used to do about shit. I used to do 27 to 30 miles a week. But I ran 7 days a week. I ran then with lift
Wow.
weights. I walk now. I have to have the left side. I have to take this bullet out of me so I can get back to running. I got a bullet in me. I got to take that out. So it's starting to hurt. and,
Damn,
and,
Bacardi, you about that life for real, for real.
All right, I ain't sweet.
it hurt when it started to hurt. Now, as I get older, I can feel it moving, and every time it moves, it hurts.
With that said, let's hear from Cheryl on this topic. Is Dr. Sebi becoming mainstream?
I find it funny when like people like because okay, Dr. Sebi, he may not have had like all the answers, but I don't think he was trying to have all the answers. He was just trying to provide better solutions, for what people what people are going through. And I know in America, I watched this documentary about how it's like something like 1/5 or 1/4 of the population in America has some type of parasite inside of them. So, I mean, even you don't even have to take all of his advice. If you just do the sea moss and the ginger and the soursop, and you do that, consistently, you'll see results. So for people to wholesale deny anything that he's trying to say, those are typically the people that never even tried. Um, More than likely, they have some type of parasite in them. I know it's very common in America. Some type of parasite when you see the people, and it's no disrespect or anything, but when you see the people with the oversized stomachs, but otherwise their bodies look normal, they look healthy, but their stomachs are oversized. That's because they have some type of fecal matter buildup, or they have some type of parasite inside of them. And I'm not no expert myself, but I mean, to me that makes sense because you don't really see people that look like that in other countries, like a whole bunch of people like that look like that. So I think even if you're skeptical, or maybe even if you haven't done the things that he said to do, and you find yourself living longer than he did or something like that, um, it's still worth trying because they're always coming up with new and innovative ways to try to do certain things to our food. And there's more, how how do you say, when they change the food and they take out the seeds, the genetic modification, they didn't have so much of that back in the day. That's something like that sprung up. Like when my grandma died when she was 89, and she was a smoker. I know if she didn't smoke, she probably would have lived till she was like 100 something. So I understand that some people, may not, they didn't follow his diet and they still live long, but we have a whole new set of issues in 2025. And, even from 1990 to now, we have a whole new set of issues. So I think to not try it is kind of like a death sentence, especially for our people, and just how doctors deal with us. And anytime you mention anything about anything being healthy or trying something alternatively, a doctor is always trying to turn you away from it. Or that's not FDA approved, when FDA has all types of, lawsuits and all types of, but people don't care, right? So I think we just need to, just follow a couple of them, see what happens. I've been giving CMOS to my son since he was a newborn. I put it in his formula. I haven't given him any vaccines. So I mean, he's fine. He's strong as an ox. He's healthy. So I mean, take what you will from it.
Yeah, about that CMOS point, and thank you for that, Cheryl. That CMOS has what's the number again? It's 92 of the, I want to say it's 95 essential amino acids. And so yeah, that, do yourself a favor. After the show is done tomorrow sometime, look up Dr. Sebi's interview on the Rock Newman show. Very informative, just overall, as for Black people, the fight for the fight against oppression, all that stuff, man. Good stuff. But let me hear from Buana next. Buana, is Dr. Sebi becoming mainstream? What do you think of his advice? Is Buana on a delay or something, or is your mic muted? All right, I'm not.
EB Mucks always mess up Awana. And when he on my channel, I can't ever hear him. Everybody
Really?
else can. Everybody else is in the chat say they can hear him though. I can't ever hear him. Kofi done fell off. Come back, Kofi.
Yeah,
Kofi.
I was just going to go to Kofi too. By the way, I think it's Kofi.
Coco, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hey, Koku,
Oh, great.
before you go, Bawana, wait a minute, Bawana. Hey, I got to step off I got to go check out some stuff with my daughter. I'm
So
gonna be
hold up a
listening.
second before you go.
Okay, I'm gonna hold up a second for you, Bawana.
Yeah.
I wouldn't nobody.
You notice how Brother Bakari made that like ridiculous statement, like he used to like run 30 miles a day, and Koku let him get away with that statement. I want Brother Bakari to prove that, because I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I don't believe that for 5
I say
seconds.
30 a week, man. I say between 27 and 30 a week.
Koku, you believe that? I don't believe that.
I
But
believe.
needless to say, Shirley made a statement. Shirley said that some of these people with these big stomachs, especially the guys, she said like they full of feces. My mother would say the exact same thing. She would say the exact same thing. It's interesting, very interesting, and it's probably true. Usually when you see these guys with these big stomachs, they don't. They need to pass. They need to go to the bathroom to clear out what's inside of them. So that's very true. But I am not necessarily a Sebiist person. I am. I like. I learned. Here's the people I learned from. I learned from this guy called Saguru. He talk about fasting. And nowadays we call it intermittent fasting. When I read Elijah Muhammad's book How to Eat to Live. How to Eat to Live. He talks about fasting and things of that nature too. I learned from him because I tried that stuff, and to me it worked for me. Also the Rastafarians. Dr. Sebi ain't been saying nothing with the Rastafarians. They ain't been saying for years. When they talk about Ita living and Ita lifestyle and Ita this and Ita that, fruits and vegetables, all these kinds of things. They've been saying these things for years. So now it becoming popular. What they call mainstream is white stream. The white people start talking about it. But people been talking about these ideas for years. These ain't no ideas. They always been around. It's just that, we say when the white man ice is colder, when they start talking about certain things, or automatically we have to start doing it. But people been talking about these things for years. These ain't new ideas. Not at all. Not at all. So when Dr. Sebi talks about these kinds of lifestyles, it's not new to me and hearing these kinds of things. I just, as Shirley said, she runs and she exercises and then she eats well. I think that this is just a common practice that we should be doing. And Koku says that many of our leaders haven't talked about these things. He is absolutely right. You know, the only people who I heard, like you say, Elijah Muhammad wrote a whole book about it. And the Rastafarians been talking about this kind of lifestyle for years. But as the brothers say, many of our black leaders haven't talked about these things. And they should be talked about in practice as well. So I give kudos to Cheryl Lees, who actually does the work and exercise. She probably is fine as hell too. You know, all this running and eating. She probably is fine as hell. But I give her kudos for all the things that she is actually doing to make her life and her body better every day. I'll leave it there, Coco.
Yeah, you know, oftentimes when Cheryl joins the panel, you could actually see her face and stuff. So yeah, she's a beautiful sister. I'll say that. But I want to touch on something I saw Afro Native World say. He said that Dr. Sebi wasn't African centered. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think he criticized the current African diet, but Dr. Sebi was the guy who put me on to fonio. And then the next person who I heard talk about fonio was Clyde Winters. Fonio is the original cereal that Africans ate. And if you know anything about African history, you know, Africans used to live to be like 120 years old and stuff, 130 years old regularly at one time. You know what I mean? It's because we ate a particular diet. That's another thing too that Sebi talked about. He talked about eating a diet that reflects who you are, eating an African diet. He talked about that type of stuff. So I wouldn't say he wasn't African centered, as Trigger Happy also pointed out as well.
By the way, Coco,
I was gonna say that, Coco, before we go.
Dr. Clyde Winters is hardcore FBA boy. Yeah, I had a run into him one day. So I mean,
really?
I tried to besmirch you, brother, but I just let you know.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bakari.
I was gonna say that to Coco about what he said about the African diet and the European, because we are, you know, just from I'm a novice. First, I want to say it's the so-called conscious community that started calling Dr. Sebi crazy, and people on social media. People like the dude named Unc, and I don't like to call people names, but I want folks who were saying calling them crazy. But anyway, on this European diet, like eating all the pig and the pig guts. Now I ain't gonna lie, that pig and them pig foots and them pig lips, them chitlins, they were good.
Pig lips.
And they were good.
Hog moss. Tell them about the hog moss.
Yeah, the chitlins and the hog moss, it was good now. But but that's not our diet. It wasn't good for us. Hey, but it was good though. And we ate too much of it all the time. Pork. And I ain't knocking on body for eating pork. But like me, when I got sick, man, I think I ate pork for breakfast, pork for lunch, pork. It was now I only eat chicken, but I'm there. I was eating too much, but that is the diet that we have. But we did what we had to do to survive. And when I talk about older people, in all honesty, then I do have to go. But think about this: what type of work were they doing? They would go, they had to go be in those fields all day in that heat. And whatever they ate, they sweating out them anyway because of the way they ate. So they lived a little longer. They probably could have been healthier. And the things that Raw talk about is what one of my brothers talk about. Stop going to these stores, get you a seed and put it in the ground. So that's what I have to do. So if you don't have the ground to put the seeds in, you can grow you some vegetables in certain vegetables in them 5 gallon buckets. You can grow you like some tomatoes and some peppers in them 5 gallon buckets, and because we might have to do that anyway and start bartering or whatever. But I just wanted to say that. And Cheryl, where you from, Cheryl? Because Cheryl ain't never had no pig lips. Where you from, Cheryl?
I'm from Philly. All my family.
And you ain't. Oh, Lord, they
None of them from the South.
They've been missing out in Philly. They ain't got the pig in the hog head sauce, the cheese.
Crazy. That's crazy, man.
But I'm from Mississippi. That's a New Orleans thing. The pig lips. I just have that's a Louisiana thing. But
I'll
they
do
were
the
good.
alligator. That alligator is, oh my God, from Louisiana.
I'm gonna tell you right now. I do really have to go. I'm gonna tell you, if you're gonna eat some meat for real, if you got an opportunity where you can get you some venison, deer. I'm just gonna call it what it is. They call it venison in the store, because they got stores up there in Philly where you can buy wildlife.
Yeah.
Yeah, they got. I'm telling you, they got them in New York too. I'm telling you, if you can get you some venison, it'll way beat buying that cow out of the grocery store. I'm just saying, if you got to eat some red meat.
Cheryl grew up on Philly cheesesteak. She is not eating no venison.
Yo, I just had a Philly cheesesteak.
Hey, look, I can cut some venison. I cut a venison steak up and put it next to a cow steak. Cheryl wouldn't be able to know the difference. It's just
Probably
clean.
not.
It's just a red meat.
I'm not opposed to it. I can't be on the vegan stuff. The way I work out, I can't do that.
But I'm gonna get off and I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna listen online. I'm gonna listen offline.
I appreciate you, Brother Bakari, for coming through. Make sure you guys are tuned in. Subscribe to Brother Bakari. He was on earlier today as well. The last thing I'll say about the meat thing too. Our recent ancestors, they weren't eating animals that were stressed out, high cortisol, high hormones in the meat because the animals are stressed. They were eating, like game that was like naturally running around and stuff like that. As for the carrots that Afro Native World mentioned, carrots are like a made up thing. They use selection techniques to make the carrot what it is today. Same thing with the watermelon, by the way. Watermelon is, if you looked at what the original watermelon looked like, it was more like a pumpkin. I ain't talking about the American Halloween pumpkin. I'm talking about like the pumpkin that we would eat like in the Caribbean. It was more like that. So it's like, you do your own history on it, right? Look up on it yourself. You'll see that a lot of these plants, when he talks about hybrid plants and stuff, a lot of this shit was like comes from nightshade, which is like poisonous, that they bred in a way that could be edible. You got to really check it out. As far as the tubers and stuff like that, a lot of times, and even white folks today in Europe and stuff, Portugal and stuff, they don't eat tubers like that. They feed that stuff to their hogs and stuff. They feed that to the goats and the livestock that they keep. I watched a show with Gordon Ramsay one time in Portugal, and he was like, "Oh, you guys growing these tubers and stuff?" We're like, "Yeah, that's what we feed the hogs with." They boil it down to make it soft enough for them to eat, and they feed them that. Anyway,
you said tubers?
Yeah, tubers like yam, cassava, stuff like that. That's not really something we're supposed to be eating. That cassava stuff, that's not an African thing. And I grew up eating cassava plenty. Grew up eating cassava plenty, and I had to learn that as I got older, that that was something that they gave to the enslaved to make them stronger and stuff like that.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, but look it up. I wanted to ask either Buana or Trigger Happy 262 Plus. Not too long ago we talked about a black doctor who was saying, a black medical doctor in America who was saying a lot of the things that SEBI is also saying as well. I think we have the white coat syndrome. We need to see a guy in a white coat with a stethoscope around his neck. And is it Milton Mills? Maybe it's Milton Mills.
Yes, it's Milton Mills. Yes.
Yeah, we need to see a guy with a white coat and a stethoscope around his neck for us to believe it. And that's to our detriment. We got to cut that out. Go back and talk to your, if possible, talk to the people who was around the elders and stuff like that. One last question for Buana. Buana, your people's from Andros, right? Did your grandparents and them do like bush tea and all that stuff?
Oh, definitely. Hey, here's the thing. Here's the thing. One of the good things of living in the Caribbean is that you are able to see black genius operate. And what I mean by that is most of the education that we think is intelligent, Western education, come with letters behind the name, PhD, whatever. But it's a thing to observe people who've never been formally trained show you genius. Show you their version of genius, which means that they will make medicines and find it in the bush, which will cure things that you don't think it will be able to cure. They have the ability to think, use reason. We used to call it, in the Caribbean, they call it mother's wit. Some people have an innate ability to just genius for different kinds of things, whether it's in electronics, whether it's in building things, whether it's just in making things. And you will ask, we show clips of Africans in the deepest part of the Congo able to construct cars just using junk products. Well, you see that on display in the Caribbean all the time. You know, these people don't have the formal training. Where do they get it from? Since they don't get it from the so-called university, where do they get it from? They must be getting it from somewhere else. The ancestors, down the line, Africans have their own genius. They have their own geniuses that they have produced. And they didn't sit in no universities. Before the university, you had geniuses that existed. Before the European university, you had geniuses that existed. So this is something that is, for me, is a good thing to see in the Caribbean. From time to time, you see our own geniuses, our own version of geniuses, which didn't touch universities, but they are still brilliant. Dr. Sebi could have been one of them. You remember this movie called Malcolm X? In Malcolm X, they had an actor called West Indian Charlie. It's in his book. Who had an innate ability to know numbers when he was dealing with Malcolm X with a numbers racket. He didn't go to no university. He just had the ability to understand numbers and how that worked. Well, you see that all the time operate in these kinds of societies without so-called formal training. Before universities, black genius existed. After when the black man to say, hey, let's construct some universities, geniuses went there as well. This is the reason why there's two sets of education that I won't easily dismiss. When I hear Anthony McFall talk, I don't know if Anthony ever got any formal training, but I understand that this man is a historian in his own right. This is what the wide world never understood. Without your training, I would still be a genius. You know what I mean? This is what they never understood or could comprehend. They only think that without our light, if we didn't have your light, we would still be intelligent and smart and be able to govern the world. So this is the brilliance. This is something that I understand and I appreciate, and I able to benefit off of both worlds and exist in both worlds. I can live in the so-called white world, but I could understand that in the black world, we have our own geniuses that exist. And to dismiss them, it'll be to your own detriment, because people will take advantage of you. You think they stupid because they don't formalize the I and the T and speak with the English brogue and accent like you do. You will get taken advantage of, brother. You get taken advantage of. You know, so I think that this is what the white world dismisses, and this is their biggest Achilles heel in my world, the world that I exist in. But that's all I wanted to say, Kofi. I see Kofi's here.
No, Kofi, keep dropping off. But to your point, before I go on to shoot bridge topic number 4, to your point, I was teaching my son and them the other day about guesstimation. And And I read a paper on this podcast before where the white scientists were so surprised at how well Africans can guesstimate. And it comes from our sense of community that we used to have. We used to have a sense of community where if some catastrophe happened in the village and we had to flee the village, we knew how to look at the number of people who were fleeing the catastrophe and be like, okay, that's all of our people. We could look at a group of people and say, yeah, that's about 70 of us. There were 70 of us in the thing. And white folks have written papers back in the day of their surprise, how they couldn't do it. They couldn't look at a pile of rocks and figure out how much rocks were there, whereas the Africans could look at a pile of stones and come extremely close, sometimes not even missing how many rocks were in the pile. So that's something that
because in their world purview, Coco, if they can't do it, it can't be done. Imagine that's such arrogance. Even looking at the pyramids and them not understanding how that was built in their worldview, if they can't approximate it, if they can't guesstimate it, no other race of people can. That is supreme. That's what you call white supremacy. It's extremely arrogant and it's extremely ridiculous at the same time. But I'll leave it, Coco. I don't want to bombard the panel. Go ahead, brothers.
Yeah, let me see if Kofi can tap in now. Kofi, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I had difficulty. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thanks for coming through. How are you this week?
On a different coast. Celebrating my anniversary right now. So yeah, I'm in Vegas. So so I thought I missed the show.
Don't spend all your money. Congrats.
Yeah. So I thought, no, I'm not a gambling man. You know what I'm saying? Only gamble on short things. So yeah. So I heard the thing about SEBI. I don't know if you guys saw on SEBI because I was in and out. One of the things that he said, one of the things he said that actually makes no sense whatsoever is saying that, well, if you have a hybrid plant has no nutritional value. That's just false. That's just totally false. All hybrid plants, which are vegetables, do have nutritional value. And then he says glucose is bad for you. That is another misnomer. And the sister on the panel will say, "Oh, but he suggests drinking soursop and Irish wine. Soursop has sugar in it, which is glucose. It's just totally idiotic and hypocritical. You see what I'm saying? And then we have to get rid of this. I hate when black people say this. Oh, the white science is the white science. No such. You cannot racialize science. If someone has an experiment, right? You ask them, okay, how did you come up with these results? And you replicate it. Now, if you're unable to replicate what he had, then it's bullshit. You know what I'm saying? And science is not something that you can deceive people with because everyone has to have the same results, right? So we got to get out of this stupid habit of racializing science. Oh, that's English science. No one does that. And I keep saying this over and over again. When during the time of the Middle Ages, when they didn't understand certain things, yes, they demonized certain things, which is pretty much our science. And they didn't do that. But guess what? At least they were smart enough to learn it. Some of them were smart enough to learn it. And that's how they got their renaissance and their so-called golden age because of things that they got from us. And now they'll be as ignorant as us saying, oh, this is racial. Oh, that's African science. And don't want to touch it and make it taboo. They're not going to get anywhere. So pretty much I just want to address that. That's pretty much it.
I appreciate that, Kofi. Enjoy your celebrations, by the way. But I gotta push back and tell you that, and Cheryl, I'll let you go in a second. Gotta push back and tell you can racialize science, my brother. The scientific method is rooted in a European worldview. We have an African scientific method. I've talked about this on the show before. That differs in some key elements. Maybe I'll bring that back as a topic. So thanks for reminding me about that.
Well, can you break down to me what that is? What's the difference between, real quick, if you can, between ours and theirs?
So real quick, right? You mentioned mathematics came up just now, right? The way we look at the way we originally looked at mathematics and and value
Oh
is
no, I wasn't talking. No, I wasn't talking about math. I'm talking about the scientific method of replicating
no
a result.
yeah, that involves math. All science, the root of all science is math, right?
Yes, but
So
I'm talking as far as like when it comes to drugs, right? So if I say, well, this particular root and this many milligrams of this root and this plant gives you this result for people who have this ailment, then I'll be like, oh, okay, let me replicate that, get that person who has that same ailment and see if they would, I'll have the same result. Or to the point where, okay, it worked, but let me do a placebo effect. Let me get two people who have the same ailment. Let me give one sugar water and the other one the exact actual medicine and see what happens. Because sometimes the body could, through will and positive thinking, it could heal itself. So that's why they do the whole placebo. So I mean, when it comes to medicine, that's what I mean as far as like the scientific method.
well, well, let me and like I said, I'll bring it back as a topic personally. But let me give you a personal experience I had. I had done some blood work with a doctor, at my doctor's, and it was a time they had like a physician assistant who was an African guy, and I was sitting there waiting for him to read off these results and stuff. And he called me. He said, "Come and sit next to me, man. Let me show you something." And he showed me a particular measurement. I forgot what it is right now. He showed me a particular measurement. He said, "This is how they screw black folks up." He said, "This measurement here, they'll tell a black person that's an okay number." When in reality, right, when they dealing with white folks, they'll tell white folks that same number is a bad number. It has something to do with kidneys. It's a bad number, and a white person will get a kidney faster than a black person because of that number and where they put the baseline for black folks. Again, I'll bring a prompt that'll allow me to speak about it much further. But science is
No, no,
not.
I
I
get
have
that. I
a.
get that.
I
But
just
that's
want
but
to
that's
make
but that's the but that's system.
okay.
That's just systematic racism, lying about the science. The science itself is not a lie. If I say I have a bottle of water in my hand, if I say I have a bottle of water in my hand, to the person, if they I don't have another person, don't say but
You
Okay.
sound
I
you
have
sound
a. I have a really good example of
go,
how science can be racialized.
go ahead, sir.
So um so vitamin D, typically when black people go to the doctors, they're told that they're I believe it's vitamin D deficient. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Koku. Um, but I'm not sure how many of you have had this, but every time I go to the hospital when I was younger, they told me, "Oh, she's vitamin D deficient." I've been athletic all my life. I've been healthy. I've never really had any like issues with health. But they would say, "Oh, she's vitamin D deficient. Make sure she takes these vitamin D pills and this, that, and the third." And I'm trying to figure out how I'm vitamin D deficient. And most people say, well, it's because you live in a part of the world that doesn't get that much sun. So while that may be partially true, the other part to that is that the way African people's bodies absorb vitamin D is different than a white person's. We are on a very cellular level, we are very different people. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. Um, our bodies absorb vitamin D directly into our cells and so then when when you go to the hospital, white people take a blood sample and they don't see any vitamin D in your bloodstream, is that's because it's not in your bloodstream, it's in your cells, and they don't test for that. So when they telling you that you're vitamin D deficient, no, not necessarily. You have to get a different type of test, but they never tell you that. So I think you really like we need to we're different people. I think is what I'm trying to get at. So I think we need different solutions. And also the thing with the soursop, um, all fruits have natural sugar, but you know how like when you look on, the back of your juice bottle, let's say you got like a soda or something like that, or some type of fruit juice, and it says added sugar. That added sugar is what he's talking about. He's talking about complex sugars. He's not talking about natural sugar that naturally occurs.
He didn't specify. He said glucose, which is the chemical
Right.
compound for sugar in everything. If it's an adjective or it's he said sugar in general. That's why he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Okay, but okay. So let's play. Play devil's advocate. Let's say that he didn't know what he was talking about. Black people have nowhere to go but up, because we have extremely bad health as a whole in the United States. Okay, so when he's suggesting things like CMOS, maybe one thing doesn't work. Maybe he's not so up to date on one thing, but that doesn't mean discredit everything. So I think we need to really just not be in attack mode and kind of like actually hear what he's saying. If he's wrong, he's wrong. We're wrong. He's not going to be right about everything. So
Well, I'm not saying that's what you're doing with the hero worship, but if the man says the compound of sugar is bad, there's no getting away out of it. He painted himself in a corner. Same thing when he said, oh, he also mentioned something about mucus is bad for the body. I mentioned this before. Your cells have a mucus membrane. Mucus is natural to your body. Too much of it is bad for you when you have an infection and things like that. But he said, full stop, I'll get the video. Mucus is bad for your body. That's why certain things with SEBI I listen to and other things I don't listen to. But I'm not going to justify him saying something that's just obviously wrong. And what you guys are saying is people lying about the science, not that the scientific result had a result that was racist. You know what I'm saying? They're trying to racialize science. And I'll give you a real quick example and I'll pass the mic. When Sheikh Anta, he was talking about, the oldest fossil, the first human being is lucid, right? First hominid is in Africa, right? They had a bunch of white boys that did not like that. And they got saying, well, we found something in Europe that's older than Lucy. And it's like, oh, really? Here's where the scientific method comes in. Send us the bones so we could do a DNA data analysis to date these bones. They kept fronting. Eventually, they got those bones, and this white boy it was something from the 16th century and some animal bones all mixed up together. There's no such thing as racial science when it comes to scientific data. If you don't like the results, you replicate their scientific method to get it to see if they're lying or not. That's all I'm saying. But yes, I do believe there is such thing as scientific racism, apartheid, medical systems. I'm not denying that. But the racializer saying that the scientific result or the scientific method is bad, that's very dangerous. That's very, very dangerous. And it takes us a shot. It takes Black people who need to really educate themselves and really understand these things. When you're kind of like racializing the science, it might question that, what is Black science then? I always ask this, like, I don't know if you guys look at Sonetta on Cyrus and SETI. He was against Amara Squad, a bunch of Africans using the scientific method just because SETI couldn't understand it. This nigga said, that's the white man's science. And we all started laughing because that's ridiculous. That's not how science works. But I'll use the mic.
I want to speak to that briefly. Because in a right world, in a right thinking world, where science is not politicized, I would understand the things Kofi is saying. Because devoid of the politicization of politics or science, he would be absolutely right. He would be absolutely right. But the reality is, science has been politicized. So when he says, show me white science, let me show you white science. White science is something like the bell curve or IQ test. This is white science. This is white science. This is scientific racism. It's
Now, tell us
put
what Black science is. What's Black science? If there's an up,
black.
there's a down, there's a left, there's a right.
Yeah. So black science is comedic comedic yoga or some shit like that. Not comedic yoga. What is comedic science? That's black science. Comedic science is black science. You are politicizing something that should not necessarily be politicized. You shouldn't do it in the right thinking world. But you can't dismiss the fact that it has been done. Race and quote unquote intelligence with Western science this is political. That's why you hear about the thing called the bell curve or IQ testing, IQ exams. Which do you know that this word called droptomania? That was a science back in the day.
Yeah, drapetomania. Where slaves
So
were
so
running away, and it was it was
yeah,
a psychiatric issue.
right. So it was a medical psychiatric issue. Droptomania, the fact that slaves run away. This is when science is racialized and is politicized. And as you say, in the world without that, you would have fair results showing certain things. But the reality is, and there's a good debate on this because you mentioned Sanetta when Ankh debated with Sekou. Sekou, it's a good debate on that with science and things of that nature. It's a good debate on that. But I would just say that there is an idea of scientific racism, Western science, and the sciences of other parts of the world. And with this view of this blanket science is just science, I absolutely agree with that. But that is not how the world works. I'm sorry, bro. That's not how the world works. But I do understand where you're coming from in that analogy. Is science should be science. Unfortunately, science has been politicized.
I want to fit in one last because Kofi's in and out. So Kofi, I'll personally construct the prompt and we'll discuss it in another week or two. And if anyone else wants to post a prompt about it, go forward and do it. I see a lot of y'all are pointing out different folks who have talked about it. But I want to fit in one last prompt here, if you guys don't mind, on the panel. And that should be topic number 4. This should be quick. I want you guys in the chat to